Marta Loop at our Marta Loop house again. Is it just me, or is it every time I come down here there's some weird, funky weather event? We got some kind of creepy ice fog going on down here today. So anyway, I don't think it'll kill us. Should do okay. Here we are out front. So today, hopefully we'll see some taping going on in here. I think it's been going on for a little bit, a while now. So it's probably in the later stages. In any case, we can see the drywall board all up and what's all involved in the taping. So let's take a cruise inside. Hey Victor, Matt from the State House.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good.
Just shooting some video for school,
Okay.
so the students can see what's going on. I don't know if Johnny told you or not, but gonna make you famous.
Yeah, this one.
How do you like that ceiling?
What?
Yeah, I know. So probably one of the biggest challenges in this house is this tray ceiling. They ran, if you look at that dark line there, they probably ran what they call X crack up there, and they screw it to the trusses. That'll give Victor a chance to try and get a straight line on that thing. So that's very important that the framing is straight and true on these things. And we were looking earlier back on the framing. I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but it probably wasn't that good. But you can see the bands over the bevels on those sheets of drywall. And they're about 10 inches wide. And when they sand, he's probably done some intermediate sanding. You can see there, you can kind of see where the bevel and the tapes are. They're just on the outside, just showing up a bit. The big wide bands on top are where the butt ends of the sheets of drywall come together. So it's a much wider area because it's not beveled at the ends. So they need to cover more. You can see where all the screws are on the ceiling. If you remember before, if you look at the wall, you'll see very few screw holes because this is an interior wall. And they've used adhesive to put those boards up. Go to an exterior wall, you can see, yes, they did use lots of screws because remember, we've got vapor barrier in the exterior wall and the adhesive doesn't work that way. See who else we can find in here. And here, this is interesting. This is the shower area. So this area has been built up. We mentioned it before with a den shield or concrete board. Okay. And this is going to get tile on top of it. So it's a tiled shower. And it's heck of a lot better than water resistant drywall, which is often blue, which isn't really worth it. Interesting thing they do here, pretty common practice, but not everywhere, is they've left about the bottom 10 inches of this shower up. When the tile installer comes, they'll install what they call the shower pan. It's a waterproof membrane at the bottom. and it will, they leave this 10 inches up so it doesn't interfere. Kind of hard to explain because he's not here, but it's basically the pan will just come up in contact here later on. And then they can put these pieces on after if they want, and then tile down to the shower pan. It's just a good way of enveloping it. They've actually left the pieces here for the tile setter. They've just temporarily screwed them to the wall so they don't go missing, and then away they go. You can see the drain roughed in there, some shower control devices and that type of thing. Shower head up above, and pot light rough in as well. So just a sample of piece of corner bead. Okay, so it's actually a metal corner for these 90-degree corners. We can see it's got these little holes just right here on the paper that's attached to the metal part. And this part is where I'm running my index finger here, is actually pokes out a little bit. If we look at this, there's a piece of it installed on this corner. And what Victor has done is he's built up this area here, only right here. I don't want to touch it because it might be wet, to create that crate surface. So everywhere you see corners on these 90-degree corner angles, as they call them, there'll be a piece of this corner bead underneath. It's kind of armored, okay? That is not used on inside corners. So where the wall hits the ceiling, that's not there. Okay, that's just a fibrous tape. We'll find a piece of that downstairs on the inside. Not fibrous, it's paper tape, okay? And again, some corner bead here. It takes a series of passes. Most of these tapers will work on more than one house at a time. So we can see that band along there. And the white stuff is dry, and the darker gray is wet. He's probably just coated that this morning at some point. There's this big, massive walk-in closet. Last time we were here, they were just putting the board up in this room. I think we were in here. I don't know if it's coming out in the video all that evidently, but I always find that interior spaces look quite a bit larger once the drywall goes on. I think it's because it's a light color, almost white or a very light gray. There's our skylight detail and that tray ceiling that Victor was just working on. There's our bathroom we were in earlier. See a concrete board around the tub. A built-in shelf. This will all get tile again, of course. There's that bathroom exhaust vent that'll pull warm, moist gases down through the wall and then out through the side of the house later on. The pipe will come out down through the floor and out that way. Call this wall here, I had a lot of mechanical in it. It's all buried now. All buried under the drywall. Everything does get buried. There's those marks on the floor that we talked about way earlier on when we were here. So if something does get covered over, it can be found later. One of the upstairs bedrooms. I think we saw the guys actually putting that piece of drywall on last time. Cutting the end off there, and now it's been taped, corner bead, and then coated. This is nearing the end here. This is probably his last day in here, I would expect, or close to it, depending on the size of the house. And he's got a partner now, too. Victor has a partner. I've never seen Victor work with anybody before.
Sometimes I came to kick his ass a little bit.
There you go.
I know him too long.
Yeah, I've known him a little while, but maybe not as long as you. Anyway, we can see here how we, this dryer vent we looked at earlier, how that works out. So it absorbs the pipe in for the dryer that goes there later. We'll just quickly get out of the way here so we don't cause any trouble. And we'll go take a look through the rest of the house. There's the top of our tall wall. A couple of big bands here. Areas like this need finishing very well. These big, long, tall walls, a very expansive part of wall here, especially when you stick a pot light at the top. The light tends to wash down these walls, really shows up imperfections. So they always make sure they do a really, really, really good job here. Any imperfections in the finishing will show. So they do an extra good job. There's a pair of stilts here. We're not walking around on those today, but that's always fun to watch. It's just so they can reach the high areas. Obviously, they don't use the ladder. This is the X-crack they use up on those tray ceilings. Okay, and what they do is the screws go in those fibrous parts into the wood. And what they do is in areas that are susceptible to weak or movement, they put the screws in the drywall to this stuff. That way the drywall is not impacted. It's kind of hard to explain, as you can tell. But basically the drywall sticks to that metal and it flexes independently of the wood so that we don't get any cracking, or it mitigates some of the cracking. Here's an example of some of the drywall tape here. Okay, so it's just basically a piece of paper tape. It has a pre-crease in the middle for getting around corners. Here's that rear entry that we looked at. It's turned out quite well, quite airy with the lights. Everything looks much larger now. If you remember, we had our big LVL beams up in there. All covered over now so we don't see framing anymore. Nice and light and airy. Expect if we can get in here later, we'll probably see maybe a built-in bench and some coat hooks there for coming in through the back door. Let's take a look downstairs. Looks like the floor is going to carry on right out over here. Probably not actually the floor, but they'll cap this probably with some wood, some kind of detail. This is our transition from our tall wall to the basement foundation and frost wall that we looked at during framing. So this is how they're going to finish it. They don't drywall over top of that. Those drywall caps are generally not that durable. Some folks do it, some folks don't. Yeah, basement looks way bigger now we have drywall on here, just because it's lightened it up a lot. Even though there's no lights down here currently. Fantastic. You can see that bulkhead with all the heating mechanical in it's been covered. Lots of work in taping this. You can see that plumbing rough in on the inside of the vapor barrier. That's going to be hidden by cabinetry, but that's the right way to do it. Looks kind of ugly right now, but we've been watching that all along. If we can get in here later and watch the cabinet installers, they'll have cabinet top for this little wet bar area, so we're hot and cold, and the drain for the sink. Cool, cool, cool. See, the floor gets pretty messy during this stage just because they drop stuff, but somebody always scrapes this with a scraper. And one thing about the drywall contractor here, I know them quite well. They actually bring a vacuum in and everything else when they're complete. So for a pretty messy stage, they do a good job. That's just storage in there. Kind of get lost in here. I can't remember how it turned out, but that's, oh yeah, the mechanical room in this way, and in one of the back bedrooms. And I think Victor's working down in here somewhere. Maybe we scared him and he ran away. That's an odd, unfortunate detail there. That bulkhead came right over tight to that window. Yikes. Hope they don't have any issues with their egress requirement there, but sure hope not. That could be a problem. That's the kind of stuff that sometimes just happens because of mechanical systems that aren't anticipated. Yikes. Not desirable, but obviously necessary. You generally get one or two things like that in a build. And when you consider the multitudinous events that happen in construction, one or two hiccups like that are not uncommon. See how all these, that's an exterior plug, that's on an exterior frost wall. You can see the way the guys routed around it with the router back on the drywall stage. Once this is all painted, electricians will pull these wires out and do their cut-in, they call it, and put the light switches in there and trim plates and that kind of thing afterwards. You see how well that drywall worked out on those stairs. That drywall continues right on down past. Remember we looked at that at framing and we saw that we had better than a half an inch on both sides, and we're left out with that little gap. So this drywall is continuous right through there. That's how you do it. And they can treat the wall with a faux stringer, if you will, later, the carpenter, or they can just have quite often just paint and then the carpet to it, or whatever they want to do. My preference is to have the false stringer, at least that way the vacuum cleaner later on, vacuuming the carpet, doesn't mar up the wall surface. So all in all, it looks real good. Once the taping's done, then this crew would leave and it gets sanded once everything's dry and ready to go, and that's a separate crew. Come in and perform all the sanding on the walls, ceiling, basically absolutely everywhere in the house where drywall and the compound has been applied. If the ceiling is to receive texture, so for the textured ceiling effect, that crew would come in right after that. Then another cleanup, and then the final and last stage for the drywall stage to be complete would be to make sure that those attic areas that get blown in insulation get blown to the correct depth for the required R value. House is then handed back over to the builder, and they can carry forward with their finishing activities and maybe tile, and then move on to paint, and then just proceed with finishing the house. Okay, there we go. So that's the taping phase. I don't know if we're going to be back inside again anytime soon. I'm sure it would be great to see if we could see some sanding. The walls get primed after that, and then that's the end of a huge milestone in the house. After that point, we'll get either cabinets or a finish carpenter, or both, depending on how much room there is in the house. You can also do tile at that point too, to some extent. And then once those activities are done, generally we'll move on to painting after that. So we'll probably gonna call that a wrap for this place at this stage, and we'll see what goes on here. You can see that weird ice fog going on. So anyway, House Lab Guy, November 2020. Pandemic edition. Over and out. Just out of interest, just noticed across the street here, before I came to see when I was in industry, that side-by-side house, I was the superintendent on that guy. It's can't remember the square footage. Typical infill down in the same area in Marda Loop in Calgary, and a couple of big decks out back, and a couple of big garages, 2-car garages each, I think. So it's including the basement, we've got 4 stories on that place, and seems to me in the back of that place there's another couple of balconies on the back. That was actually a pretty interesting build. It turned out quite well.